Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us, whether it's on Zoom or here in person. My name is Anna. For those of you who don't know me, I manage adult programming for the Lake Bluff Library. So please come by and say hi. I'm going to tell you about our next two programs. We actually have a week off next week. We have a movie night happening with Gorton. It's The Princess Bride, which I'm a huge fan. So I hope some of you will sign up for that. It's at Gorton Community Center. And you can find more information on our website. That's August 20th. And then after that, we're going to have two more programs here in-house on famous animals of Hollywood. And a local patron is going to be telling us about her time in the Peace Corps service working in Namibia. So tonight's program will be recorded. And we upload our recordings onto the library's YouTube page. I also will send out the link to everybody who registered for the program. So if you know someone who couldn't make it this evening, please forward that to them so that they can access this information. You can also contact me at the library if you have any questions or would like to follow up for more information. For tonight, if you have questions throughout the program, you can post them in the chat, and Rick is going to pause throughout to answer those. Otherwise, if you're not comfortable with the chat, or if you'd rather wait till the end, we'll do questions in a small section at the end, and I will turn on the ability for you to use your microphone at that time if you'd prefer to ask something aloud. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and we will let Rick get started here.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Anna, and the library to allow me to spend a little time with you this evening. So the topic, as it's the slide denotes, is Senior Housing 101. Would really like this to be interactive. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to, as Anna suggested, to put them in the chat, and I will stop periodically and address those. You know, if if I mentioned something that, you know, I really didn't thoroughly explain it enough for you till you have your understanding, or you have a follow-up question, you know, I encourage you to use the chat. And again, so my name is Rick Graffagna, and I'm with Senior Solutions, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my company at the end of the presentation. But so why don't we go ahead and jump in? If you don't mind, you know, I'd like to start out with a little bit of a humorous story, at least for you. I hope it's humorous. So there were a group of seniors that were out on an event, going on an excursion, and they were in their bus, and they had left, and several minutes into the trip, one of the female attendees on the trip, you know, walked up to the bus driver, tapped him on the shoulder, and asked if he enjoyed peanuts. And he said, I do. She said, well, I have some peanuts. Would you like some? So he extended his hand out and, you know, grabbed some peanuts and munched them down and enjoyed them quite a bit. And a few minutes later, the same woman approached the bus driver and asked if he would, you know, like some peanuts. And so so that repeated itself, you know, 2 or 3 times. And finally, the woman approached the bus driver again. And before accepting the peanuts, the bus driver said, you know, I really feel bad about eating all of your peanuts. And the woman said, well, you know, the peanuts are really too hard for us to chew, so they're too difficult. So you know, please enjoy the peanuts. And he said, well, that's too bad, and I'm enjoying the peanuts, but if you can't eat the peanuts, you know, why would you purchase peanuts? And she said, well, we really enjoy the chocolate that's on the outside of the peanuts. Hopefully somebody is chuckling out there. But anyway, so why don't we jump right in? So the first slide, first subject area that I want to touch on is there's 3 different financial models for retirement communities. One is what we call a buy-in. You know, and if we were in person, I would ask for a show of hands to say, hey, so how many people have heard of a buy-in, and what do you think, you know, a buy-in, you know, senior property is? And so we aren't, and so I can't ask that question, right? So a buy-in model is a senior community. They call it a buy-in because the entry fee, if you will, to gain access to that property is fairly significant. It's going to be some level of a six-figure amount. Could be as little as $150,000. I've seen as high as $550,000. And so you're buying into this community to gain access to some of the other levels of care and types of housing, which we'll speak to a little bit later. It's not a real estate play, so there's no title or deed exchange. You're not literally buying a piece of this property, but you're gaining access. And typically, with this buy-in, there's a percentage associated. It might be 55%, it might be 80 or 90%. And what that means is that, if at a point in time you leave the community under your own volition, or perhaps you live there long enough and you unfortunately pass away while living there, that percentage of that upfront fee is then either returned to you individually or to your estate, for the benefit of your beneficiary. So for example, if it was a $200,000 buy-in and it was a 90% plan, then $180,000 then would be returned. The devil's in the details, and there's a pretty lengthy contract associated with buy-ins, and I always encourage families to really read that thoroughly, but the details will explain more thoroughly exactly what are the circumstances of how those funds are returned to you. So what else does a buy-in get you? Well, one, it gets you preferential. In many cases, it'll vary a little bit from one property to the next, but generally it'll gain you access to the other levels of care. In some cases, it'll be priority access. So if there's a waiting list, you can go to the top of the waiting list versus someone that's coming in outside of the buy-in aspect and coming in direct. In some cases, there's locked-in pricing or preferential pricing that you have compared to someone that was not a buy-in resident. Sometimes you buy what they call a life care plan, or there may be a benevolent fund, which essentially says that if at some point you're no longer capable of, your funds have run down, you are no longer able to pay the monthly fee, they've dipped back into the original buy-in and use that to help pay the monthly fees that are associated with your apartment. And if it gets to that point, you no longer and you can't afford to pay it, you can stay. All right. So that life care plan or that benevolent fund guarantees you a space. So you never have to leave. Okay. Next is what I call rental or community fee. The access fee or community fee is significantly less than a buy-in. It might be $2,000, might be $4,000, non-refundable, which again gains you access to that community. You may, it's monthly from the standpoint that, your monthly fee, and you may sign an agreement that looks like it's a 12-month term or agreement, but you've got great flexibility, and in the state of Illinois, it really is month to month. So in assisted living by law, you can give a 30-day notice and your financial responsibility for that property come to an end. So it's not like your more traditional market rate apartment where you sign an agreement, and even though you want to leave before the agreement comes to an end, you may be liable for that rent until the end of the agreement. In senior housing, you've got a lot of flexibility to be able to leave. And next is or third is the low income or affordable housing. In this particular situation, these are apartments for seniors. Typically have pretty limited support resources, pretty much for seniors that are independent, and their rent may be will be less than the market rate, and there may be vouchers available to help pay for the rent, or the rent may be a percentage of someone's income. One of the challenges with affordable housing is supply. Demand in many cases, is greatly higher than the available inventory of senior apartments. And in many oftentimes there are pretty lengthy waiting lists associated with affordable housing. So next, let's talk a little bit about some different types of housing that you find in senior communities. So first is independent living. And just like it's stated, independent living are for seniors that are independent. They don't have any personal care needs. Their mobility is good, probably still driving, may even be working or have a part-time job, but they want to get into senior housing. So in independent living, you'd have your own apartment. Could be a 1-bedroom, could be a 2-bedroom. In some cases might even be a 3-bedroom apartment. They're unfurnished. You bring your own furnishings and home decorations and decor to make it yours, to personalize it, to make it your new home. Comes with a full kitchen. Your base rent or your rent for your apartment, the amount of it will be a function of the size and the style of the apartment, and that rent gets you things like utilities and maintenance, and there's a meal plan associated with it. Even though you have a full kitchen, the meal plan will vary from one property to the next, but will typically be less than 3 meals a day. It might be 2 meals a day, or it might be a monthly stipend that you get to spread out over the course of the month, and you degregate that stipend over the course of a month. Laundry facilities are either a washer dryer right in your apartment, or there may be laundry facilities on the same floor for you to do your own laundry. Wi-Fi and cable typically included. Sometimes there's an additional fee for a landline phone. Your base rent also gets you local transportation, programming, and activities. If there's a couple, if it's a husband and wife that are moving into the apartment, there's what they call a second person fee. They don't double the base rent, but there's a smaller amount, which essentially is a cost of food. Okay, so that's independent living. Next is independent living with services. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the term activities of daily living, or ADLs. Those are things like bathing and dressing and grooming and mobility support and assistance in the restroom and medication reminders and things of that nature. Okay. So now you're living in your independent living apartment and life throws you a curveball. Okay. Let's say you maybe injure your shoulder and you're having difficulty dressing and undressing yourself without some assistance. Well, you can schedule someone to come in and help you with that, with the dressing in the morning and the undressing, getting ready for bed at the end of the day. This would be a paid for service. It could be a caregiver that you hire on your own, or it could be a caregiver provided for you by the property which you live in. Another example would be, let's say you've become a little unsteady on your feet and you're a little uncomfortable stepping into and out of a shower, and you would feel more comfortable having someone readily available to be there, not to bathe you, but to be there to make sure that you're safe, that you step into the shower safely and you exit the shower safely. So that would be an example of an additional service that can be brought to your independent living apartment. And that can work as long as the service that you need can be scheduled. So you can schedule bathing assistance, you can schedule dressing, you can, if there's some mobility needs to, an escort service, you can schedule that perhaps to leave your apartment to get to meals or maybe an activity that's elsewhere in the building. Once the level of care that you need, kind of moves beyond the schedulability for the services, and you need to more closely be 24/7, then we're talking about assisted living. Okay, so assisted living apartments are licensed separately than an independent living apartment. There are a small number of properties where that assisted living level license can be brought to your IL apartment, but in most cases, it might be a separate building on the campus that you're currently living in. It could be a wing of the building. It could be a floor that's been designated for assisted living. Traditionally, assisted living apartments are very similar to your IL apartment. Could be a studio, could be a one bedroom. Typically, they do not have a full kitchen. They have kitchenettes where you have countertop and cabinets and a sink and a refrigerator, oftentimes a microwave. You don't need a kitchen because or a full kitchen because your base rent includes 3 meals a day. Okay. Again, served in a restaurant, dining room served restaurant style with a menu. The rent gets you the same things as independent living apartment. It takes care of housekeeping and maintenance and cable and Wi-Fi and things of that nature. It also includes laundry. So even though you may have a washer dryer in some limited cases in your apartment, that laundry service is paid for. Local transportation and activities and programming and things of that nature are all included. So that's one piece of the cost with assisted living. The other piece would be the cost of care. And for every resident that lives in assisted living, there's an assessment that's completed. They determine, the totality of what help that you need, focusing in on your activities of daily living, what total amount of care and help do you need to get through the day safely. And that's personalized to you. The level of help that you may need may be very different than the level of help that someone that lives in an apartment next to you or across the hall. Again, it's very personalized. In assisted living, there are nurses on staff. Typically, they are the ones that manage a medication program, make sure medications are distributed safely and effectively. Nurses may be there 24/7 or at least a significant number of hours. There are also doctors that do rounds or have visits. Could be gerontologists, could be neurologists, podiatrists, audiologists, in some cases dentists that come and make themselves available for you. All right. So let's move on to memory care. So let's say there's a dementia diagnosis in play. So there are memory care options that can work, effectively with and manage people that have dementia. There are memory care only assisted living properties, either standalone memory care operations that's all that they do. That's their expertise. And then there's also memory care that's, within your assisted living community. It could be a separate building. It could be a wing. It could be a floor that's designated for memory care. So what makes a memory care apartment a little different than assisted living? One, typically all of the apartments are studios. They're studios because the residents really don't spend a lot of time in their memory care apartment. It's secured. So residents that live here that perhaps are exit seeking or wanderers from a safety standpoint, that's secured, so that minimizes the chance of that taking place. The programming, the activities are geared especially for people that have cognitive deficits. Compared to assisted living, typically they're held more frequently. There's more of them and shorter duration and a little bit less complex. We want the residents that are participating with those activities to feel like they can be successful by doing that. I'll oftentimes get asked by family members, well, gee, if someone has a dementia diagnosis, does that mean they automatically need to be in memory care? Well, that's not true. There are many people with early onset and maybe mid-stage dementia that are able to live in assisted living very effectively. Sometimes the reasons that people have to go into memory care might be A, because they are exit seeking, or B, perhaps they could really benefit from the programming available to them in memory care. So next, continuing care retirement communities, or CCRC. Many of you may have heard of that acronym. Okay, so CCRCs are typically associated with a buy-in model, and the buy-in model, or CCRCs, have on their campus, all of the levels of care that we've spoken to already. Independent living, assisted living, memory care, and in most cases, skilled nursing. Okay. And so it's all on that campus. And when I spoke to earlier about being able to transition from one level of care in a buy-in community, that's really what I was speaking to, that you could transition from IL to assisted living to memory care, and then, potentially maybe short-term in skilled nursing, and all stay, on the same campus and the same property. So the next type of housing I want to speak to is supportive living. And, most of the time people really have never heard of supportive living. So all of the levels of the types of housing that I've spoken to up until this point, these are private pay only options in the state of Illinois. Okay. So public aid, Medicaid, if you will, is not available to help pay for those levels of care. So this is where supportive living can come in and can be a great option for families. So supportive living is unique to the state of Illinois. It's senior housing. It's apartment style living. It's for people age 65 and older. You'd have your own apartment, could be a studio, could be a one bedroom. Comes unfurnished, you provide your own furnishings. It's a kitchenette. So you have, sink and refrigerator and countertop and cabinets like we've spoken to before. Your base rent, if you will, includes things like laundry and housekeeping and maintenance and all of the things that we've addressed already this evening. It also includes cost of care. Okay, so cost of care is rolled up and is included in that base rent. And very similar to independent living with services, the care and supportive living needs to be able to be scheduled. Okay. So like we said, medication reminders or bathing or shower assists, things of that nature. There's some mobility requirements that are necessary to be appropriate for supportive living. A person needs to be able to stand and pivot on their own, even if that's to get up out of a chair and go to use a walker or to go to use a wheelchair. Essentially, you need to be able to navigate your apartment to be able to get to the restroom to take care of your toileting needs. Okay. So that's kind of a general picture or framework with how supportive living is and how it is distinctive from the other types of housing we've spoken to is that if at some point someone does not have the ability to pay privately, you can apply for Medicaid and get approved for Medicaid, and you can stay there. Okay, so that's very unique. And so as long as the physical needs and the financial needs are there, supportive living can be a wonderful option for families. Next, just to touch a little bit again on affordable housing, spoke to it a little bit already with the first slide, but affordable housing typically is for seniors that are independent. There may be a house manager that lives in the building that can help with some social service needs if necessary. Typically, there is not a dining room option. Typically, they come with full kitchens. The beauty of this is that if you want to be in an environment with other seniors and have it be more affordable than the market rate apartments in your area, affordable senior housing could be a great option for you. And finally, skilled nursing, both for rehab and for long-term. So skilled nursing or nursing homes, depending on what term you're more used to. For the rehab piece, that's short-term. Let's say you fell and you broke your hip, and now you need to recover to improve your mobility. You've spent 3 midnights in a hospital, and they discharge you from the hospital, but before you go home, you go and spend some time in a skilled nursing environment for a short-term basis to work on your mobility, get some physical therapy, occupational therapy, things of that nature. All right. There are other circumstances where perhaps someone lives long-term in skilled nursing. And there's basically two scenarios for that. One would be that the level of care that they need falls outside of the bounds of what an assisted living license allows. And that's pretty extreme things. So things like on an IV for a medication, feeding tube, ventilator, respirator, level 3 or 4 wound, some pretty significant issues taking place that, by license cannot be managed in assisted living. And in those particular cases, someone maybe need to live long-term in skilled nursing. The other situation where sometimes people move to skilled nursing long-term for their new home is where, perhaps they're appropriate and they need to be in assisted living or memory care, but they no longer have the ability to pay privately to live there. So that in those particular situations, they need to apply for Medicaid, public aid, and they go to and find a Medicaid bed in skilled nursing. Okay. One thing I just wanted to talk to a little bit about assisted living. Assisted living really can be an end-of-life solution for families. Hospice can be brought into assisted living. And so it really can be a situation where, if it gets to that point for someone's life, they don't necessarily need to go find somewhere else for their last days. The other thing, besides doctors and nurses that are in assisted living and senior housing, is that there's therapy available. So besides the doctors and nurses, you can get physical therapy, occupational therapy. So in the example that I gave where the person broke their hip, if they are discharged from rehabilitation, short-term and skilled nursing, and then they migrate back to their apartment in assisted living, some of that therapy can continue, paid for by Medicare. All right, everybody. So in the hunt for senior housing, some key items that you need to consider. Usually right there up there near the top of the list is location. All right, and so people really want to focus in on a location for a number of reasons. One, maybe they want to stay very close to where they've lived for many, many years. They're familiar with the area. They're close to their church, familiar shopping. Their doctor's offices are all close by, so they want to maintain that. Okay. Other location issues that may pop up is that you want to be near family. So perhaps you've lived in the far North Shore area your whole life, but now the family have moved to the family members have moved to the south suburbs or western suburbs, and you want to be a little closer to them. Perhaps at some point in your life, you relocated and you left the northern suburbs of Chicago and went to Arizona or to Florida. But now perhaps you want to come back, to be closer to family. So you want to be closer to wherever they end up. A location really ends up becoming a pretty key variable. Next consideration is, what's the level of care? What are the health services that are provided in the property that you're looking at? Are you independent living today, but you want to be in a community that has assisted living? Perhaps there's dementia in your family history, or perhaps you or your loved one are dealing with early onset now, and so you want to make sure that maybe you don't need a memory care option today, but you want to go to a property that maybe has that if at some point that becomes necessary. What does the property do for fun? I mean, this is going to be your new home, right? And so you want to get a good understanding of, what's the lifestyle like? What's the vibes? Is there, or maybe you're exercise buff and you want to check out what kind of exercise equipment and recreate and is available to you. What do they do for activities? What do they do for fun? What kind of excursions they do, restaurants and things of that nature. So you want to check that out, because it's not all just about safety and healthcare. It's about fun and continuing to live a full life. Obviously, cost is a factor, right? And so you want to have a good understanding not only of what the cost looks like today for the level of housing that you're considering, but also down the road, so perhaps you're starting out in independent living, but you should, take a look at the cost structure for assisted living and what are the different scenarios for cost of care. And if memory care may be in the offing, understand what that might look like too, so at least you kind of have that in the back of your mind from a budgeting and planning standpoint. The food, how many people enjoy food? Food's important to me. I think I mentioned that in senior housing, food is served in a restaurant kind of an environment, different menus, specials that happen throughout the week and month. Quite honestly, the highest percentage of the food is cooked from scratch right on the premises, and honestly is really good. I mean, this is not dorm room, college level type food. It really is. It is good. Kind of tied back to what I mentioned a little earlier with lifestyle, but what activities take place? What do they do for outings? Local transportation can be pretty important. Perhaps you're no longer driving. So what does a local transportation option look like? Are they able to take you to Sunday services for church? Are you able to go to medical appointments? Do they have a Medivan available? So perhaps perhaps you need a wheelchair assistance. Can they help with that? Do they go for shopping? Things of that nature. So it's good to check that out to understand what the options are for the communities that you're considering. Key area here, right? What does the staff look like? Are the caregivers and the employees in the building actual employees of the property? Or are they outsourcing that, to staffing agencies? What's their caregiver to resident ratio look like in an assisted living and memory care? What's the tenure of the management team? How long has the executive director been there? The memory care director, assistant director. There's a level of turnover in this industry. There's no doubt. And I think everybody would readily speak to that. But I think it'd be good for you to know that, perhaps the team that you're in the building that you're considering is very tenured. They've been there for 5, 10, and 15 years. Or perhaps, everybody's been there for 6 months or so. So it's good for you to have a good understanding of that. What are the buildings in the ground like? I mentioned to families that if you're out visiting properties, your tour begins the moment you turn into that parking lot. Is it well maintained? Is it clean? This time of the year is, what's the landscaping look like? Is the lawn mowed? Are the flowers fresh and maintained? Is there good weed control? When you're walking through the building, is it clean? Well painted? Is the lighting in good shape? These are all indicators of the pride that they take in the building, and how are they investing back in the building to keep it current and fresh. Food, sorry, I put that in there again because for me, it is important. I remember several years ago, I was working with a woman. She was 96. Her name was Dorothy, and we were about to go on a visit a couple of properties. And she said that, so I asked her, I said, Dorothy, you looking forward to the tours? And she said, yeah. She asked me how the food was. And I said, well, the food is really good, Dorothy. Why do you ask? And she said, well, when you're 96 years old, you don't have much else to look forward to than food, which I chuckled, and we ended up finding a great option for Dorothy. Security and safety. So what does that look like in the building? Is there someone at the front desk, doing a review and ensuring that everybody that's coming in and leaving the building they're doing it appropriately? What are typical visiting hours? When are the doors open? When are the doors locked? If a family member wants to come in outside of those hours, or perhaps you left to go visit family member for some sort of a family celebration and you came back late, how does that work? How does access work? what kind of, especially this kind of weather that we've been dealing with, and the tornado warnings from yesterday, what is the emergency preparedness plan look like for that building? These are all great questions to inquire of. Future needs addressed. As much as it's challenging for all of us to look down the road, we really need to challenge ourselves to think not only about today, but what tomorrow might be, and is the place that you're selecting going to be able to accommodate that. So we'll keep moving. A lot of times I am asked by family members, when is it the right time to move? And that will vary dramatically from one person to the next. And excuse me, I got distracted here a little bit. Yeah, so that'll vary from one family to the next, and there's various reasons for why. Oftentimes it might be safety concerns. Maybe it's to relocate, to get closer to other family members. Oftentimes I'll tell the adult children that they need to, if you're waking up at night, wondering if dad has fallen, getting up to go to the restroom at night, that might be time to consider doing something differently. As I indicated, safety in most cases is a driving factor. Family geography can be very important, and then sometimes cost. You may be at home, and you may be. I'm a strong proponent for aging in care, or aging in place. I'm sorry, for as long as possible, but sometimes that cost of care at home can be driven up pretty significantly, and assisted living could, in many cases, be more cost effective than staying at home. All right, so senior housing today, that might be on your mind. Things are maybe not 100% normal, but they're as close to normal as they've been in a year and a half. Senior communities are all open for business. They're allowing family tours, most without any restrictions at this point. The assessment process that I spoke to before are being done both face-to-face and virtually. The move-in process, there are sometimes some limitations on that, but you're able to bring family members and/or movers in to get mom and/or dad settled in their new place. If residents are vaccinated, there's really no isolation period required. So you can leave the community, you can go away for a couple of days, you can leave to go to have a meal with family members and not worry about needing to be isolated when you come back. If you're a new resident and you've been a negative COVID test and you've been vaccinated, when you move it, day one, when you move in, you can have full access to the property. Family visitations have been greatly increased. In a lot of cases, you can come and visit. You don't need to be scheduled anymore. They may ask you to not stay in the common areas, but maybe to spend time with your loved one in the apartment. Right now, family dining in the dining room is generally not allowed, but hopefully that'll take place. That'll open up soon. Employee and resident health is monitored very closely. If there is an outbreak, there's testing is done readily. Activities and group dining with social distancing is allowed in virtually all cases. Very high percentage of residents have been vaccinated. When I inquire, when I'm in properties, it's north of 95% and of residents have been vaccinated, and a very high percentage of staff and caregivers have been vaccinated. There are a number of senior communities that are, corporately for them, they've actually mandated that their employees and staff are vaccinated. And what the future is going to hold, we're going to see, right? I mean, with this new variant that's out there, hopefully you don't have to take too many steps back, but that'll remain to be seen. So we'll just keep going. So what types of payments are accepted? Private pay, Medicaid and public aid. So to refresh your memory, there were two scenarios in the state of Illinois where Medicaid and public aid can be the payer for someone to live long-term in senior housing. One of those was supportive living, and the other was a Medicaid bed in skilled nursing. Medicare, a lot of times, I get asked the question, well, gee, if we move into senior housing, what role does Medicare play? And maybe can we stop paying for Medicare? Well, unfortunately, Medicare does not help pay for senior housing or long-term placement. But Medicare still continues to play the same role. So you're not able to get rid of Medicare. So things like paying for hospitalization and doctor's appointments and therapy and short-term rehabilitation, prescription drugs, all of those continue. And you use them the exact same way as if you were living in your senior family home, or you've migrated to senior housing. It's utilized the exact same way. How can I fund these payments? So one would be via Social Security income. Second would be pension. If you were the benefactor, had the benefit of working, in your work career for an organization at a pension plan, you can utilize that. Hopefully, you've been in a position to set some monies aside over the years and have some savings and investments. If you've been living in your home for many years and you've paid that mortgage off, the equity that you've built up and the funds that you can generate from the proceeds from your sale of your home can go a long ways to help pay for senior housing. Typically, not a lot of people have long-term care insurance, but if you were able to have that and you've got a long-term care insurance policy, the vast majority of senior housing properties accept long-term care insurance. Can be a great benefit. And obviously, I don't know the population that's on the call right now, but if you're young enough, I would encourage you to speak with your insurance broker to get more knowledgeable about long-term care insurance and the cost. It can really benefit you, if and when you get to that point. Veterans benefits can go a great way towards paying for senior housing. There's a veterans benefit called aid attendance, and it can be both for a veteran of the military that served during a time of war and was honorably discharged, and also can apply to a surviving spouse. It can be a monthly stipend, almost like an additional pension for an individual veteran themselves. I think it's up to like $1,900 a month. There's some needs, some financial needs that need to be in place, but it's not a very well-known benefit. There's also benefits available for in-home care, and I'll speak to that here in a little bit for veterans. A lot of times you can line of credit or a bridge loan. If you're sitting on your house, you've got equity build up, and it's kind of an urgent matter to get into senior housing. You can sometimes utilize that equity to start paying for senior housing. In some cases, people have purchased a whole life insurance policy and have accumulated a cash value for that. There's some convertible programs out there now where you can, convert that, whole life insurance policy to kind of a hybrid long-term care insurance policy. Don't know much more about it than that, but if you do have that kind of a policy, I would encourage you to speak to your insurance professional to find out more. And then finally, the kids, hope, in my personal situation, my kids will not be, unfortunately, in a position to help me out. My wife and I will be on our own. Noted the smiley face. So other items of importance. Just spoke to veterans benefits. Can be great. That benefit, again, that I mentioned is called aid and attendance. There's also, for a military veteran that needs help in home, they can be eligible for up to 12 hours of home care, per week, which could be a great benefit. Not many people are available to aware of that. Sometimes there are some estate planning or elder law issues that surface. Perhaps you think, perhaps it makes sense that down the road, Medicaid may be an option, and for your family that maybe need to be considered. An elder law attorney can maybe help you through the estate planning process to make sure that you're appropriately positioned. And there may be other, elder law issues that surface. Things like power of attorney or healthcare directives. When I'm working with a family, I always ask the question about whether a power of attorney is in place. And if not, I think it's really important that you do. So there's two types of power of attorney. There's one for property and there's one for healthcare. Two separate documents. These are documents that are used while someone is still alive. And if at some point they no longer have the capacity to make good decisions on their behalf, the people that they've identified to be their powers of attorney can step in and act on their behalf to make key important decisions. Real estate services, oftentimes people know wonderful realtors that can help them, but in some cases they don't, and so there are a lot of great realtors out there. As you know, real estate is really hot. People are getting premium prices for their homes, and they're selling really fast. So who's got a lot of stuff at home? I know I have a lot of stuff. My mom is 91, living in the original house, and oh boy, I'm not looking forward to the time when we have to deal with the things that have been accumulated there. But there, if it's too big a burden for you to think about or too big for your family to think about, there are some wonderful downsizing services out there that can help dealing with managing your property, the things that can't go with you and won't fit into your senior apartment. They can help with packing, they can help with moving, they can help with just about everything related to that. I haven't spoken to in-home care, but in-home care is a great option. If again, I'm a strong proponent of people staying at home as long as possible. So I work with some wonderful agencies. These are licensed by the state of Illinois. The caregivers that they would send to your home are their employees. They've been trained, they've been background checked, they've got the appropriate insurances taken out to manage, to protect you from a liability standpoint. They can help with any of your activities of daily living, bathing, dressing, grooming. They're non-medical care. They can do things like light housekeeping and meal preparation and run errands and take the doctor's appointments, things of that nature. In-home care is typically either scheduled on an hourly basis, so perhaps you need help for 3 or 4 hours a day. Perhaps you need shift work. Maybe you need some help 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours at night. So that shift work is priced out on an hourly basis. In addition to that, if the level of care that you need is really round the clock and the senior recipient is pretty much getting through the day and there's a bedroom available to the caregiver, you can get by with 24/7 caregiver where someone is actually living in your home. They need to be able to sleep, get 6 or 7 hours of quiet time. And that pricing, instead of being on an hourly basis, is based on a day rate. Okay. Adult day services, another great option that most people are not familiar with. Most communities have an adult day service in them, and that can be a great place to take a senior. Maybe it's in the morning every day of the week, or maybe it's a full day. You're around other seniors, there's caregivers, there's group activities, there's lunch provided. Perhaps mom is living with a family and they're going on vacation for a couple of weeks and mom can't stay at home. So perhaps that adult day service can be a wonderful option to explore. So how do you go about locating communities? One would be to do the looking yourself. Rely on family and friends to give you some ideas and some input about what communities they're familiar with. Do the internet search yourself, right? There's Google. A lot of people are internet and computer savvy and friendly, and you can just do some hunting yourself. There are also some senior related websites that are out there. There's some online senior placement agencies as well that can maybe give you some more personalized guidance. And then there's some local senior placement companies like Senior Solutions. So if you don't mind, I'll give you a 30-second commercial about Senior Solutions. we're kind of like matchmakers. Okay. So we focus a lot of our time and energy in senior housing, but also in home care. But we're matchmakers in the sense that we help connect families to the options that makes most sense based off other circumstances, from level of care to geographical preferences to lifestyle needs to I think I mentioned levels of care already, costs, what does the budget look like? And we help connect families to the properties that make the most sense based off of their particular circumstances. This is my own company. Our services are free. Our compensation comes on a referral basis, and we work with the vast majority of senior housing. And in a sense, if someone was to select a property that we connected them with, they would compensate us for that referral. We're very local. We're very hands-on. Love to learn and listen to the story. We'll schedule tours. In a lot of cases, we'll accompany families on the tours to make sure all the right questions get asked and answered. And we've got a lot of wonderful resources. We've been doing this for nearly 10 years, whether it's senior housing or it's in-home care or it's downsizing or legal or real estate assistance with veterans benefits and the like. We can help with all of that. If you do have any questions, I'm available at the phone number listed there, 630-246-2579. That's my email address. Feel free to check out my website. A lot of great videos that I produced and resources on the website. You can see some of the testimonials, the kind words that people that I've worked with in the past have offered up for us. So that concludes my presentation. So if I can do this again for you, I'm happy to do so. And if you thought this was a benefit, if you're talking to some of your other library partners, in other towns, I appreciate a kind word. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. I will let you go for the evening, and
Yep.
we'll go ahead and say goodnight to everyone.
Yep. Drive safe. Bye now.
Bye. So Rick, can you tell me a little more about Senior Solutions? How long have you been with them?
So this is my own business. We started about 2012. So we're a little over 9 years at this point, and started out buying a franchise. At about 3 years after the franchise, I was able to extricate myself from the franchise agreement. So now this is my own shop, and so it's great. I love it. I mean, I love working with seniors and their adult kids and learning a little bit more about their stories and trying to help them. And which is why I really enjoy this session, because it really is just some basic education for people to help them maybe understand a little bit more about what senior housing is all about.